I'm making a little video here about construction financing of a construction company for a project finance. Of course, it's not project finance at all. It's a construction company. So I'm going to work through a little of the model and explain how it works and tell you about what the really key part of this is. And the key part of this is to set up a nice little cash flow waterfall, which is so common to so many other projects. It's a little tiny bit different perhaps than other cash flow waterfalls because you have to see exactly when you're running out of cash, when the cash balance runs out. But I think it's a reasonable little exercise, so that's why I decided to make a video. Somebody in my class said, okay, I have to do this. So let me, what I've done here is I've left most of the model intact, but I've put some yellow little things, so I'll show you how to work through an exercise on this. Okay, and so we have some kind of project cost, and my friend said, I don't know what exactly how we're going to spend. So I said, here, this is supposed to be median, and this is the standard deviation. Okay, I said, okay, let's make a little S-curve, and when you make an S-curve, we can use a normal distribution. This is just where I say, okay, well, we've got, I should go back here. Excuse me. We have a date, of course, at the top, and it's month by month. And I give it a start date and this is the construction months. Okay. By the way, it's early in the morning in Saudi Arabia, and there's some banging outside, so I'm sorry if you hear some of this banging. Building something. I'm not in a fancy hotel. I'm in a little bitty hotel, which is nice. Okay, now here are the project cost, and then to put some kind of S-curve together with it, we can just say, okay, let's take this period number and put in the average, put in the standard deviation, and then multiply it by the construction period switch, and that's a standard kind of construction period switch that we have in just about any kind of model. And then when I do this and I sum it, it doesn't sum to the whole thing because we have little different patterns. So then I just say, okay, let's normalize it. Let's take this curve and divide it by the total. And then what you can do, I'm getting into these gimmicks more and more, which is kind of stupid. Let's put in a column and, show what the S-curve really is. And we can kind of see how it is. And we have a couple of little different patterns. Okay, good. And then the next assumption says, well, what happens if it takes 6 months to collect and the government has been notably kind of a little bit late in paying sometimes? This happens. And that's really the risk. What happens if we're late? So this is how many months, once you spend some money, I should have maybe explained this a little bit better. Once you spend this money, apply the S-curve to how much you spend. This says when you're going to collect it. Now, we're not quite finished. They are going to charge a profit margin on this as well, and they're also going to get an advance payment right at the beginning from the government. They're going to give them 20% of the funding. So then we have to figure out how we're going to finance this. And they call it a PPF, and I am totally embarrassed. I can't remember what that stands for. Facility is the last one. Project payment facility, maybe? That's probably what it is. And then we have a total loan commitment. So this is classic loan terms with a commitment fee and an interest rate that I allowed to change. Now, there's a limit on how much they can borrow with this thing called, what did I call it again? project payment facility or something like that, there's a limit on this one. We put some kind of limit, and after that the same bank gives them a short-term commitment, and that interest rate I would think should be a little bit higher on the short-term commitment. And then there's some kind of additional fee you have to pay. So that's the assumptions, and then you start with some costs, okay? And all we do here is put the total amount of the costs, nothing there, just use F4. And I hope no matter what kind of model you have, you start with this little thing to the left. And then we just plop our S-curve in, multiply our S-curve by the amount, and we get our expenditures. I just needed to get this. And then we're going to add in this profit margin I said. So that's the total amount you're allowed to collect, but then we have to delay it. And this time I had a 12-month delay. Now, if you have a delay, people overuse this offset command so much, but this is where the offset would really be helpful. You say, okay, let's go up to this total collection, and then let's keep it on the same row. That's what we do next. And let's wait 12 months to get it. Okay, and once we do that, let's also, no, that's it. Okay, well, it gives us a reference because it looks 12 months over here. So when we do this kind of offset, you almost always have to have a little if statement and say if the period is greater than or equal to this number, then we're implicit. And then if you don't like the false, because I like the false, but most people don't, so then we just put it here. That's how much we collect. So we're delaying our collections, right? And then, oh, I have to multiply this not by 1. Actually, they collect 80% of this. This is maybe if you experience this industry, you kind of know what's going on, but whatever. So then we compute this fee, the fee on top of that. And then, just like any model, before you go to the P&L, the cash flow, or anything else, please, oh, I had this class, and this man, after 3 days of a class, he said, no, I put the balance sheet at the top. Oh my God, the balance sheet has to be at the bottom. The P&L is late. The cash flow is second to last. Please. Oh God. You can do it otherwise, but it gets horrible. The model should have a natural flow. So I'm going to see how much left, how much money we can still borrow. So to do that, you go down to the opening balance to get the amount you can actually borrow. And then you see, well, how much do I have left to borrow? And you say this. So this is the amount of the commitment, the amount you've already taken, and you need this for a minimum function below. And then there was this little thing that says 70% of the amount we charge up here, 70% of this total amount up here is the only amount we're allowed to borrow. I don't know why they have that in the term sheet, but whatever, they do. And then here's the next key. When you go to this borrowing schedule, you should at the same time make a cash flow statement and make all your titles in the cash flow statement. And so what I'm going to do here is just say, well, here are the loan draws that we have. Now, we only need to borrow money when the cash flow is negative, and the cash flow gets negative here. So there's a classic kind of thing you do. And you put maximum, and you open the bracket, and you put a minus on this, or 0. Okay, that's how you start. Shift Control R, because my generic macros that nobody ever uses is open. So that's how much we borrow. But there's a little bit of a problem here. Let's start with this. So now what you do is when you go to the borrowings, you go downstairs to the thing we just did and collect the borrowings. Okay, so far. That's the big key, is go down and get it. Now, what happens here is eventually the loan balance. Oh, shoot. Come on. Oh, no, it didn't get up to 400. Let's make it get up to 400. So then that means we can't borrow anymore. Don't worry about the graph right now. So I'm going to, let's put the interest rate a little bit higher, maybe. A lot higher that was. And let's let's make the delay payments even more. Okay, so that's all very automatic now. I hope you see what whatever. Okay, where am I? What? Did I not just put the borrowings here? Maybe I did it in the wrong place. Oh, shit. Excuse me. No wonder. So I'm going to I have to get there are two facilities, you remember. This was the first debt facility. And I just go and get that from the right cash flow statement. I suppose I could say I made a mistake on purpose, which would be a lie. And I get that from this little maximum statement. And then let's kind of see what happens. It went up to 400. And when it went up to 400, that means we really can't borrow anymore. So that's pretty bad. And so what we better do is we can never, let's look at this one. In this case, we have three standards. This is a limit on borrowing. This is a limit on borrowing. And of course, the final limit on borrowing is the net cash flow that we have. So after we put this little maximum in, we put a minimum in, and this time a minimum is of two different things. And this is kind of why I made the video most, to show you how to kind of set up a nice little cash flow waterfall where we have this minimum and we also this minimum. So we get the smallest of all those three things. And that determines how much you can borrow. Okay, and now let's see if it worked. All right, let's go forward. And we never get up to 400. That's good news. Okay, I don't know why it doesn't get up to exactly that much, but okay, in this case, our cash flow must be negative, not be negative. That's how much we need to borrow. Now, they told me that when you repay the debt, you repay it 6 months after you borrow it. So let's use an offset again, and this time we'll do it quickly. If you go up to that number, you say that number has to be greater than or equal to, if that number is greater than or equal to the 6, press the F4, of course, then put offset, and you go up to the borrowings, and you put comma 0, comma minus how long it takes to borrow. And maybe I'm going to multiply that by 1, too. Okay, so now the borrowings, they get repaid here. Okay, that's not so complicated, is it? And then we better put that downstairs in the cash flow statement. So we go down to the repayment, and we make, in this cash flow statement, we have all the cash that's coming in, then the expenditures, and then the repayment. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. And we put in the repayments from this time I kind of went the other way because it's a fixed repayment. And then let's look at the cash flow for a minute. So the cash flow says you start with an opening balance, and then, they get this big payment right up front, and then they have all these expenses, which include all the interest and the commitment fees. And I don't think I'm going to even bother going through all of that. I'll give you the file here. The file will be, I don't know where it will be. I'll put it on the little notes to the video where the file will be. Okay, and then so what you do is you start with all the cash balance, and then the opening cash balance is, of course, the closing balance in the very end right here. Okay, whoops, I went too far, excuse me. Okay, and then we have all our operating costs, and we put in the repayment. That came from upstairs, and then we have the cash flow after the net cash flow after the repayments, which is the receipts you get minus the costs. And then we said, well, if that was our maximum and minimum, and then we have some net cash flow. And then I say, oh, well, what happens if it's still negative? That could be a default in some cases, but in this case, we have this other debt facility, so we just can keep borrowing on that facility. And then eventually we have to repay. So this has got a maximum. That's how much we have to borrow. I said there was no limit. I probably should have fixed that a little bit, and I could have put the commitment in. Remember that? Okay, that was a mistake. Huh. And then we put the repayment, and that's when the maximum is positive, not negative. It's positive, not negative, positive, not negative. And those two things with the minimum, maximum, and the minimum, those two things go way right up here. So we take, for our short-term borrowings, we go downstairs and click on the amount, and then we go downstairs and click on the next amount for the repayment. And of course, the closing balance is the opening balance plus this, and I leave the positive number convention in these kind of things. I cannot imagine doing it with switching signs to negative and positive. I would just make too many mistakes. And I don't really give a crap about this. Remember, in a class, we wasted an hour debating whether we should use the positive or number. God damn. Okay, he's a nice guy, actually, the guy who did that. I can't remember where it was. It was in Amsterdam or something. Well, I just remembered it. Okay. And then we said, well, that's the remaining. So that's the cash balance. We started with our opening cash balance. We moved through the end, and then we can put our change in cash right at the end. Okay. And now I think I've finished with filling in these things I wanted to show you. So this was how to use the maximum and minimum and just kind of attach the buttons. And when this man gave me this exercise and said, oh, can you do this thing? And I thought, oh, I don't know how to do that. And it wasn't, if you apply the same kind of things. Now, I also put a little cash balance here and a balance sheet. A good little exercise to do that. And to do that, we need to find how much income we have and figure out what's going on. But I think that's probably a worthwhile check to put in when you have all of these things. And then you can finally go to the end and start playing with it. So if we have 14 periods, what happens is, we didn't pay it all off. So what we can see what kind of profit margin we need. We can see what kind of delay we have, and if we have a long enough delay, yeah, that's okay. It just takes longer to get. But if we don't get any profit, there it is. We can't pay off all the debt. So we can kind of look and see how much cash we have at the very end from our balance sheet and how much debt. So I'm going to put this model somewhere on the disk, on the website. I have no idea where yet. And it's corporate finance, I suppose. I'll put in one of the corporate finance ones. And that's enough of this video. Goodbye.